Hello everyone, welcome back to Worlds Unwritten. My name is Jeriko, and today we are going to be continuing our deep dive into the classes of the Player Core 2 Remaster project for Pathfinder. Today's video, we are going to focus on the monk, the primarily unarmed fighter of the parties, the typical class fantasy of beating everything up with your fists over the weapons and magic that so many other classes get. So let's jump right into it. Now, I do want to preface this by saying something. Monk has always been one of my, I don't want to say least favorite classes, but one of the ones I've always had the least amount of interest in. And that's mostly for me because the unarmed class fantasy really just doesn't do anything for me. I've always been someone who's been a fan of using different and strange or unique weapons. Magic has always been really cool to me. And while I like the idea of someone who, when everyone else has these unique weapons and magic, just takes their hands and beats people up, I really like the idea. It's just never been something I've prioritized. So I don't hate the class, but it's never really been at the top of the list of what I want to build and play around with. But I am still going to come at this with an open mind and see if what they've changed really excites me. Now, the way Monk worked pre-master is that a lot of your feat choices are on taking different stances early on, and then taking feats to supplement these stances as you level up. And the way stances work, they are a combat ability only, that when you are in an encounter, they typically require one action to enter. They will have some sort of buff, and they will also provide a unique attack. That attack is the only attack you can really use while in that stance, which was always kind of weird to me and something that, while I understood it, I didn't necessarily appreciate for the most of the time. I almost would have liked it if I think a really solid change I was hoping to see, and even in the first place, was that while in those stance, it simply replaced your unarmed strikes with that option. And that way you could still do other things. You could throw thrown weapons, or you could even do a sword or different weapon in one hand and then still make those new unarmed stance strikes with the other hand or with your feet at the same time. It was something I was hoping to see change, and unfortunately it doesn't look like it did, which is a bit of a shame. The other thing that always kind of caught my attention with Monk that I wasn't sure if I liked is the fact that there's no real, I suppose the term would be subclass choice. When you take a look at all the other classes, they have a choice you make at level 1. For Alchemist, that would be your research fields. Barbarian gets their instincts, Champion gets their causes, Investigator gets their methodology, so on and so forth. Monk is the one class in the game that doesn't get any sort of unique choice that helps them immediately branch out at level 1, aside from whatever feat they choose and the stance that they'll likely take there. And I always thought that was a missed opportunity, and one of the things that made Pathfinder so great, that instant customization that really made so many classes feel different even when multiple were built by different people, is sort of missing for the monk. They don't have anything that really separates one monk from another right off the bat with a different focus. So, while that hasn't been adjusted in the remaster, and we're still missing all of that, I did want to just come right out and say sort of what I would like to see. If Monk were to get changed in the future, what I was hoping with the remaster was that Monk would sort of lose their stances as actions, perhaps, and get stance focuses that they would choose at level 1. And those stances could be like an animal stance focus, a nature stance focus, and a weapon stance focus. This is me just spitballing, but if you went with the animal stance, you would get like the crane stance and dragon stance options all at once. If you went with the more natural world focused, you might get mountain stance and the Wild Winds stance. I know that one's a focus spell, but we'll get into that. And if you went with a weapon-focused one, you would get like the monastic archer and monastic weaponry abilities and stances all put together in one as well. Really let you choose those, and then let the developers from there branch out even further with what these actions can be done in relation to those stances. Give ways to then adjust your strikes even further to do really cool things. There isn't really a way for Monk to do energy damage or any other type of damage between bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing. And I think that would have been something really cool if, like, an elemental stance monk is really able to take abilities that are going to let them transform what they're doing. Like, the Wild Wind stance, if they're in that form, let them make attacks that are going to deal electricity damage, things like that. If I'm remembering correctly, all of the fire-focused stances have been removed from Player Core 2, and I think that's just a massive shame. So, that's my little opening blurb. I am not disappointed with Monk because I do like where it is, and I really like the concept of stances in the first place and letting people choose those. I just wish they were baked into the class a bit more prematurely and then make the feat options even more diverse as people level up from there. That's what I was really hoping for and would love to see someone do in the future, but it's not what we've got. So, what do we have instead? Quite frankly, not many changes. Monk was in a solid spot before the remaster. We've gotten some stuff removed, we've gotten some stuff added. I think the best change that you're going to see in every Monk is that at 5th level, with your Expert Strikes class feature, you are now automatically getting your critical specialization effect on unarmed attacks in the Brawling group. Previously, you had to take, I believe, a 2nd level feat for that. Let me check. Yes, the Brawling Focus class feat was what you had to previously take, and that gave you the critical specialization effects for brawling attacks, as well as monastic weaponry if you had that. The at least unarmed attacks is now baked into your Expert Strikes class feature, and if you take a monastic weaponry, it directly states in it that if you gain critical specialization for unarmed attacks, like with the Expert Strikes, you get it for your monk weapons as well. I really like that that's baked into your class identity now. Pretty much every other martial in the game has a way to get critical specialization, so such a focused martial like monk, having to take a feat for that specifically never felt good. So I really, really like you're getting that automatically. I think there's nothing wrong with that. That's one of the best changes Monk has gotten, in my opinion. Moving on from there, Flurry of Blows operates exactly the same. You get to make 2 strikes in your same turn. They combine damage for the purposes of resistances and weaknesses. Multiple attack penalty is applied normally. It's good. It's a fun ability. It is one of those abilities that's sort of the other downside of Monk, I've found. Your multiple attack penalty increases so rapidly with Flurry of Blows. I've always sort of wanted to see how it would look with Flurry if it was like other abilities where your map didn't increase until afterwards, but that I can also see being too strong, so I don't have an issue with it. It's again really an ability I don't particularly care for. It's not really my sort of class fantasy, but I can see why people really like to use it. You've got your powerful fists, so your fist is a d6 instead of a d4. You don't take a penalty when making lethal attacks, and you can, of course, many of the different stances you can go into will have attacks that deal d8s or potentially even a d10 if you do a dragon stance. So, really kind of jumping directly into feats from here, because just about all of the other proficiency increases and class features are the same as what we had previously, which is all fine. Path to Perfection was always a neat ability. Felt really, really good and let you choose and be a bit more versatile as you were leveling up. So I think those are good. But let's go ahead and jump right into the feats, and I want to say right off the bat, the biggest change we've seen to the feats is how with your key spells work. Chi spells, I'm not really sure how that's pronounced, please don't hate me. It used to be Ki is how it was spelled, now it is pronounced Qi, and I'm just going to keep calling it key because that's what makes sense to me. But the biggest change is that pre-master, every single key feat had their own individual feat you could take for them. Now, the key feats themselves have a basic version at level 1, and then as you level up, there are advanced key spells, master key spells, and grandmaster key spells as their own individual feats. And each of these feats gives you two different choices, and you can choose one of them. So if you take basic key spells at level 1, you can take either Inner Upheaval or Key Rush as a focus spell, and taking this feat is a requirement to be able to take any other key spell feat down the line. Notably, with that, something that's kind of neat is that, say, you wanted to go ahead and not take either of the advanced key spells. You don't want to take that feat at level 6. You don't have to, I don't believe, because when you get all the way up to, I believe it is 12th level, I might be wrong about that. I am in fact wrong about that. Where are my other feats? Why can I not find them? I am stupid. 16th level is where your master key spell options are. Those only have a prerequisite of the base key spell feat. So you don't have to take advanced to be able to take the master, and you don't have to take master to be able to take grandmaster. So that's a pretty neat buff. I do think it's, I'm not even sure you can really say buff. I do think it's kind of weird. You've got basic spells at first level, then you've got the advanced spells at 6th level. You can't really get any new key spells though until 16th level when Master becomes available. That feels weird timing wise with your levels. I don't think it's necessarily an issue because the Master key spells are 8th rank inherently, and then the Grandmaster are 9th rank inherently. But I do kind of like this feat structure where you take a feat and you choose one of the two. Um, I think that's fine. It really isn't any different than having a feat per, but at the same time, it does create the oddest decision ever where these key spell feats don't have the special tag on them. They do not have the ability that once you choose one, you can choose this feat again to get the other one. So you really are locked in, and if you choose one, you have absolutely no way to take the other key spell. This is really weird, and I think the design decision behind it is to sort of try and match the idea of the sort of path to perfection abilities where you have to make a choice on you finding your own path to enlightenment. But at the same time, the path to perfection features you get automatically, and by the time you reach 15th level, you're getting all three of these up to or sorry, not master proficiency. Yes, master proficiency, and then better at 15th. So all of them are getting to increase, I believe. Sorry, I'm no. Forget what I just said for a minute because I'm an idiot. You can tell I never particularly read Monk terribly deeply. I'm so sorry, everyone. The third path to perfection, I think this is how it always worked. You choose either what you did for your first or second path to perfection and increase it from master to legendary. So by the time you max out your monk, you will have one save at legendary, one at master, and one that has still stayed at expert. Okay, so I can then see sort of the idea that with these key spells, you have to make choices. And once you choose one, there's no going back down the path, there's no branching out. You are taking a single linear path that you are focusing on. But I can't say I like that. I can't say I approve of that design decision because that's also not really stated anywhere. That's me just pulling it out of the hat. This is one of the few and perhaps the only real times that you have options when taking a feat, and you cannot take the feat again at another level to get the other option. And it doesn't feel like there's a good reason for that. It also feels really weird because you have these key spell feats that give you choices, and that seemed to replace all of the individual feats that gave key spells pre master. Yet we have two feats as well now that specifically grant a single key spell. The Harmonized Spell or Harmonized Self feat at 4th level gives Harmonized Self as a unique key spell. And there is Wind Jump at, I want to say, level 8. I probably am not remembering my levels correctly again. Wind Jump is 10th level. So you get these set of feats, the basic, advanced, master, grandmaster that let you choose one of two, but then we have one more set of two focus spells at completely different levels that because of that have one unique feat just to take them. And then of course you have the Clinging Shadows and Wild Wind stance that are key spell stances to activate. The whole thing feels very jumbled. I really can't say I like or approve of the design philosophy of Monk because it kind of feels like they threw the whole kitchen sink at the wall and just went with whatever sticks. There isn't really any consistency across everything. And I really think that was a mistake on the developers' part. I really don't like that. I think they should have done something a bit differently. But who am I to specifically judge and say anything bad about it? I just think that the thought process is very strange. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And it's probably going to end up confusing, especially new players to the game, who will look and see, okay, key spells are your first introduction to the key spells. I'm talking about the feat key spells is your first interaction to your key spells as focus spells. And at the same time, you're also getting introduced to the stances, which are the one action abilities that change up what you can do. These are all pretty much level 1 options, so you'll choose one of them to focus on as you go. But then at second level, not second level, 4th level is where you're first going to get access to a feat that doesn't give you an option of key spells. It simply gives you one specific key spell, which goes sort of against the design philosophy they've already been introduced to. And then past that, they're also going to get up to, at 8th level, they can take Clinging Shadows Initiate, which is what grants them the Clinging Shadows stance key spell. And so now they're going, okay, well, there's key spells and there were stances, but now there's a key spell stance. And quite frankly, if I'm being entirely worth it, the Clinging Shadow stance is one of the worst ones in the game, in my personal opinion. It deals only a d4 damage. That's void damage. And now the benefit of it is it doesn't replace your other strikes, it just gives you the ability to make them. But, you know, an 8th level feat for a 4th level or 4th rank spell that lets you make d4 damage, d4 void damage attacks, and also gives you a circumstance bonus to athletics checks to grapple into the DC for creatures to escape from you. It, I can't say it feels good. I really can't say that feels good. Perhaps it really is solidly worth it for that bonus to athletics checks to grapple and your escape DC, but the void damage attack it gives feels practically worthless for something so low. But it is what it is. It's not the end of the world. I definitely think some people are going to take it and test it out, especially if you are going into a grappling focused build. That might be worth it. So, but comparatively to what you can have by that point if you're going into other stances, it definitely to me ends up feeling like the key spell line of abilities for Monk isn't very good. It's not. It feels like you're supposed to maybe only ever really take one. It also does the other Clinging Shadows stance, all of the unique key spell feats. They do all require the key spell's base feat, and since there's nothing that gives that to you for free, you have to choose at first level one of the unique stances, the ability to use weapons or a bow, which is also a weapon, shut up, uh, or your key spells. And then at second level is where you would go back to take potentially one of the other stances or take key spells then. I don't like it. Again, it feels like one of those instances where you're being pigeonholed into a choice. The key spells feel like they should sort of be supplementary options that you could take compared to the stances being more intrinsic to the class. But instead, you have to choose, and as you level up, you're going to, if you want a little of both, you're going to have to give up on one of those higher level abilities for a lower level one. Or you're going to feel pigeonholed into playing a human who can take the general training uh, ancestry feat for an additional first level class feat. And I don't like feeling pigeonholed. I don't like feeling like I have to uh, take multiple lower level abilities as prerequisites just to have a bit of versatility and variety as I go. So that's probably my biggest disappointment with the monk, and it's really not an issue on its own. It's fine. Monk plays fine with these. People are going to make builds just the same without any issue, but it just doesn't feel good to me personally. I looking at that from an outside perspective, I'm looking at that and going, meh, hmm, it's okay. Nothing special, nothing amazing, but it is what it is, and it makes me even less interested to try and figure out a monk to build just from these initial ideas. But let's take a look at what else the monk has going on with its class. So, with everything going on, it does get some cool things. At second level, there is a shooting stars stance feat, which is a stance, and its entire focus is on letting you throw shurikens uh, sorry, let me just actually say it easier. While you are in the shooting stars stance, you can use monk feats and monk abilities that normally require unarmed attacks with a shuriken instead. And this does require monastic weaponry. Shurikens are monk weapons, so it works just fine. I don't know how frequently you're going to use it, but I do think it is a really nice choice for someone now to try and figure out an actual thrown weapon build for monk. So go wild with that. I've always enjoyed the concept of thrown weapons, even if they are not the most amazing option. It's a really unique thing to try and make work. So I am glad that feat exists to allow people to try and figure that out a bit better with monk. That's a good option. Taking a look, we have no ancestral weaponry anymore, which was something that felt really, really weird to me to see go. This was previously a second level feat that required monastic weaponry and an ancestry feat that granted you weapon proficiencies, and it counted all melee weapons with that ancestry trait, either agile or finesse, and the monk trait. So it made it so you could use your monk abilities with your ancestry weapons, which is really, really nice. And I believe that has been just written into monastic weaponry now. Yes, if you have familiarity with an agile or finesse weapon, this grants the monk trait for it. So it's slightly different than how ancestral weaponry worked, because ancestral weaponry took any ancestry weapon, let it apply either agile or finesse, and gave it the monk trait. Now it's only weapons that were already agile or finesse from your ancestry or another source also become monk weapons for you. I like that it's built into monastic weaponry now, but it does limit you a little bit. If it has an ancestry trait, but it's not agile or finesse already, you cannot use that. You can only use agile or finesse. And I think the non-agile or finesse ancestry weapons are a little bit reduced. And I do think I can agree it does feel weird to be able to add on the agile or finesse trait to those sorts of weapons if they don't already have them. That's very much an idea of the base construction of how the weapon is done. And so being added on was kind of a weird thing, but I am a little sad to see that sort of unique versatility go. Um, but it's not the end of the world, and getting the ability built into monastic weaponry so you don't have to take a second feat is something I can approve of just from the start. Taking a look at what else we've got, the water step feat. That used to be an 8th level feat. It's lowered down to 6th level, so you can stride across liquid surfaces without issue. I think it's fine that it's been lowered from 6th to 8th. Nothing really to say about that. I don't think there was anything that made it being at 8th level particularly bad. Being able to get it just a little bit earlier is pretty cool. What else do I have on my notes? I'm kind of jumping around a little bit here. This is a little bit different from my other classes where I'm going level by level because Monk really doesn't have a ton. So I'm just sort of going with what I noticed as being something that sort of jumped out at me to be unique. Let's see here. Getting some other slight buffs and lower levels. Form Lock was a feat previously at 14th level for the Wrestler dedication specifically that allowed you to potentially counteract polymorph effects on a target you are grabbing or restraining. That has inherently been made a just monk feat as well now, which is really nice. It does make sense for monks to be able to take that if they are going down a grappling route without the Wrestler dedication. So it's nice to be able to see them take it now. Fuse Stance used to be a 20th level feat and has been dropped down to a 16th level feat, which is kind of nice, allowing you to now take those two stances and combine them into one. That sort of harkens back to my idea I talked about already, where I would like to see sort of multiple stances being baked into your class identity on a specific choice when you choose to play Monk, and I think Fuse Stance would sort of be just a part of that. Fuse Stance could then be reworked to let you sort of like when you take Adopted Domain, or what it's called in Cleric, that lets you learn spells from a different domain connected to your deity. This could be something that lets you take an additional stance from one of the different stance types and combine it with what you've got. So you could then do cool things like a Falling Stone Dragon Tail, something like that. You can do that now, but I'm just imagining what it would look like if we were to change Monk as how I mentioned earlier. The Timeless Body feat used to be not bad at all, just preventing you really from dying due to old age, and that's cool. It has been changed slightly, which I actually quite like the change. It's also been buffed. So, previous Timeless Body, yes, made you stop aging and gave you specifically a status bonus to saves against poison and disease, as well as poison resistance. The new ability is called Peerless Form, and it combines 14th level Timeless Body with the previously 16th level Enlightened Presence, I believe, and kind of makes it one unique action that solely buffs you. So the new Peerless Form makes you stop aging, though it does have my favorite little caveat. It does say you still die when your time is up. So you will not die due to old age, but Pharasma can still choose, his time is up, kill him, and bring you to the Boneyard, and there's nothing you can do about that. And I like that. I think that's funny. Fits with the lore a bit to put that in there, so that's a good little bit of wording to add. But then you gain a +2 status bonus to just Fortitude and Will saves. In general, no caveat, your Fortitude and Will saves, you'll always have a +2 status on them. And that's really strong. That is a much more mechanical benefit than the you cease aging, because aging is so often inconsequential in a campaign for anything other than flavor. I don't often see stories that last many, many years and people have to worry about how their characters age during that period of time. So, getting a better mechanical benefit than just a bonus to saves against poison and disease, because other classes and abilities can get it at much lower level than 14th level. This is a much more solid mechanical benefit that does feel like a 14th level benefit. So I really like the updated Peerless Form. I think that's a great option for 14th level. out of all the great options, 14th level has some really, really cool choices, and I do not hate that. One of the things that existed pre-master and I really don't particularly like still is the fact that I can't read. God, sorry, completely ignore what I was just about to say. I was about to say that the Whirling Blade stance was the Wild Winds stance, but I'm an idiot, so completely ignore that part. Let's keep going on somewhere else and get rid of that shame. The 16th level Flinging Blow feat, which was really cool as an ability that made it really push someone far away when you hit them, has been removed entirely, uh, which was kind of a shame that they got rid of that. I kind of liked it being able to hit someone so hard that they were shoved backwards was really cool, and that's more so just the 1 millimeter punch can do that as well. So I can see why they got rid of it, but making it its own feat that didn't require 1 inch punch previously, I liked, and kind of losing out on that option is a bit of a disappointment. We're going to jump back up to some lower level feats here to talk about one that definitely applies to a game I've currently got going on, and that is the change to Whirling Throw. There's a 6th level feat, single action you use when you have a creature grabbed or restrained. You make an athletics check against their DC, their fortitude DC, and throw them, potentially, dealing some bludgeoning damage for every 10 feet plus 5 times your strength modifier. So the biggest change it got is that the attack trait has been added to it. And from people I've spoken with, they don't particularly like this change because it never felt like the ability was inherently strong as is, and putting the attack trait on it is effectively a nerf that they didn't think it needed. Personally, I've got a bit of a different philosophy on that. I think it should have always had the attack trait. And not because it's too strong or because it's too weak, but because it is 100% in line with all of the other athletics focused actions that you make a roll against an opponent's DC for an effect. It lets you force move an enemy like shove or reposition. It also deals damage to them and can potentially knock them prone, like tripping them. So the fact that it never had the attack trait was definitely good for it, but it never really made sense to me that it didn't. It made it objectively better than all of these base actions you could do. And it is already uniquely better because it combines multiple of those base actions into one option. It's effectively a longer distance shove and potentially dealing damage to them, like if they crit if you crit succeeded your attempt to trip, and similarly knocks them prone if you crit succeed. So it's got a lot of things it does, and the value of being able to reposition an enemy to about anywhere within 30 feet of you is really, really crazy. So I don't have any big issues. I can see why people don't like the fact that the attack trait was added, but personally, I think it's fine because I think it fits with the design philosophy of Pathfinder 2nd Edition in the first place. It doesn't need to not have the attack trait. And if you do want to focus on Whirling Throw, I think you just have to change up your action economy a little bit. Grab them still normally, and potentially that just means you have to rely on them not escaping as frequently and using Whirling Throw as your first action on your next turn as opposed to potentially the last action on your turn after you've reached maximum map. So I do think it is going to require a bit more thought to be able to use that ability, and I don't necessarily think that is a bad thing. So I'm quite okay with the changes, no matter what other people say to me. While we're still in low levels, I do want to bring attention to the fact that out of all the stances, most of them being pretty darn cool, we have lost 2 of them. The Gorilla stance as well as the Peafowl stance. Gorilla Stance was a bludgeoning damage attack that gave you a bonus to your climb checks. Peafowl Stance was something that required monastic weaponry and only worked if you were using a sword that let you one action per turn as a flourish to attack and then step as well with your sword. These were pretty neat stances. They had one additional action apiece as you leveled up, and it just feels really strange that they were gone. There doesn't necessarily feel like a particular reason they were gotten rid of, aside from perhaps the fact that climbing doesn't happen as frequently as other situations, so Gorilla Stance wasn't as impressive. But I can't really necessarily think about why they got rid of the Peafowl stance. There is monastic weaponry, but then past that, there really aren't any stances that let you take advantage of using that weaponry, aside from Shooting Star stance to throw shurikens, and Clinging Shadows stance, since that is an additional strike that does not replace your strike. So I think it's really disappointing that we lost the Peafowl stance, since that was the one real stance that sort of worked off of your monastic weaponry, especially at a low level. And so while I'm happy we got Shooting Star stance, it does sort of feel like that was the replacement for the Peafowl stance, and I would much rather have the Peafowl stance. The ability to attack and then step away is such an impactful ability for then potentially forcing your opponents to waste a move action to come back into melee with you, that losing it just doesn't feel good. I don't necessarily think it was used super frequently, but the versatility it offered was something really, really good, especially when it came up, and just flat out losing it kind of sucked. I do also want to bring attention to the fact that Monk is the one martial class that is missing a reactive strike, I believe, in any real form. You have the Crane Flutter at 6th level that lets you attack someone if they miss an attack as a reaction, but I suppose I can't really complain because certain other classes that get reactive strikes as a semi-martial or main martial have to have specific reactions like Implements Interruption for Thaumaturge. But it just feels really, really weird to me that Monk can't inherently take a reactive strike. I think if there were another class like Fighter that deserved to have a reactive strike as part of their base kit, that would actually be Monk. They're so focused, especially on their unarmed attacks, that not having that ability inherently, or even the option to really take it unless you're going down a very specific stance chain, to hit someone when they move or are doing something right next to you, feels really off to me. So, like, you've got Stand Still at 4th level, which lets you specifically reactive strike on moves, and then you've got Crane Flutter that lets you sort of opportune riposte, hit someone that misses you, but there's no reaction as far as I'm aware that allows you to hit and potentially disrupt a manipulate action, which is sort of a core identity of the reactive strike. So it just seems really, really strange, a lot of the decisions that have been made for Monk. It feels to me like a class that has a bunch of cool ideas on it, but no one ever really took the time to look at these ideas and make them cohesive and work together. It really does feel like they got a bunch of people together and say, hey, each of you are in charge of coming up with a stance and a feat or two for abilities based off that stance, and then we're just going to throw it all together in the class and let people do whatever they want with it. It doesn't feel like there was someone sitting at the helm and going, okay, what is our design philosophy behind the Monk? What do we want to give players the ability to really do and focus on? So I'm going to leave you guys off with one final feat the brand new 20th level feat for Monk, Godbreaker. Now, first things first, let me just say massive props to whoever came up with the name for that feat. Godbreaker. What a great feat name. It's up there with the likes of a lot of Kineticist Capstone, Impulse feats, some of the new Oracle feat names. That's just fantastic. That tickles my fancy just off name alone. It does have multiple feat requirements, and it is the sort of capstone feat for focusing on grabbing an enemy. This is a 3-action ability you do on your turn, where you take a creature you already have grabbed or restrained. So they have to be grabbed still at the start of your turn to do this. You throw them 20 feet up in the air, jump after them, and make an unarmed strike. If it hits, you can repeat this process up to 2 more times, pushing them another 20 feet up, moving up towards them, and pushing them up further. They remain grabbed throughout the entire sequence, so they'll be off guard to your strikes, which is nice, but you're effectively comboing someone up potentially to 60 feet in the air. If you miss with any of those 3 strikes, Godbreaker and the grabbed or restrained condition immediately end. You both fall, taking falling damage as normal for the total height of your jump. If all 3 strikes are successful, you keep grabbing on the creature and effectively suplex it to the ground, dealing your unarmed strike damage plus falling damage to it, and you land on your feet taking no fall damage yourself, and the creature remains grabbed or restrained by you. What a cool concept ability. It does require to work fully that you are able to hit 3 attacks at maximum map. And I don't think that's the worst thing for a monk. I think this is a really cool ability. I don't think it's necessarily amazing if I'm understanding it. Dealing your unarmed strike damage plus fall damage effectively means this is an opportunity to deal 4 strikes worth of damage, which is sort of what you'd be able to do if you were, if you Flurry of Blows and made 2 strikes on your turn, as well as fall damage and maintaining your grab on a creature as well. And it's 60 feet up in the air, so that would be 30 points of fall damage that they would take as well. 30 points of bludgeoning damage that they're just forced to take. This is really, really cool. I like the feat. It's a really cool concept. I don't necessarily think it's amazing, but I think anyone who builds up to this point with a focus on grabbing and throwing is just going to have a blast using this. And I think when it comes to Monk in general, that is my overall thoughts on it. Monk seems to be a fun class. It's not a class that's necessarily really, really good. It's not a class that's bad. It seems to be a class to play if you just want to have fun and do cool shit. And I can't fault the class for that. I'm going to fault the design decisions behind it and the thought process behind Monk in the first place, but the concept of Monk itself and the people who play Monk, they're just having fun, and far be it from me to take that away from them. So if you enjoy Monk, please keep enjoying it. Please go crazy with these updates. A lot of them are really nice changes for what you can do. You got some buffs, especially at the high level of what they've got. Continue to have your fun with the class. I can't wait to see what you are able to do to enemies, suplexing them into the ground from 60 feet up in the air. So with that being said, that is where I'm going to end off the video here today. I'm a little surprised I stretched it out this long, simply because Monk is one of those classes that doesn't have a whole lot changed. Oracle is still going to get its full-on video. I've got a lot of thoughts to share about that. I am debating, I'll see what my notes are looking like, and as I go to record, Sorcerer and Swashbuckler, I may combine into a single video. They're in a similar space as Monk, in my opinion, where there aren't a ton of changes to them. They took what was already there, what was good, made them a little bit better, added some new things, so I may just combine them together into one video, or I'll make them 2 shorter videos, but record and upload them on the same day. So, once more, my name is Jeriko. This has been the deep dive discussion on the remastered Monk for Pathfinder, and I hope you all enjoyed. I'll see you all next time. Have a good one.